Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into the very shadowy, and let's be honest, increasingly powerful world of private military companies. PMCs. Now, these aren't your grandfather's soldiers of fortune. We're talking about a modern, multi-billion-dollar industry that is literally reshaping conflict all over the globe. Okay, so to really get our heads around this, let's start with a pretty recent event. One that basically yanked these private armies out of the shadows and threw them right into the global spotlight, shaking one of the world's biggest military powers right to its very core. So, picture this, June 2023. Those are the words of a man named Yevgeny Prigozhin. Now, he wasn't some general or a government minister. Nope. He was the head of a private army called the Wagner Group. And after getting on the air and accusing Russia's top military leaders of being totally incompetent, he just ordered his thousands of troops to march on Moscow.
Yeah, it was a pretty shocking turn of events. And it left the entire world asking this one massive question. How on earth did we get here? How did a for-profit army get powerful enough to challenge a nuclear-armed state like Russia? Well, to understand that, you have to look at the very clever legal tightrope these groups walk.
You see, the whole existence of groups like Wagner, it all hinges on this really fine legal line. They aren't technically mercenaries, you see. And believe me, that one little distinction, it means everything. So let's break down what's actually going on here. It really all starts back in 1989. The United Nations got together and officially outlawed the use of mercenaries. The definition they came up with is super specific. Basically, it's someone fighting just for the money, who isn't part of an official army. So right then and there, the old-school soldier-for-hire business model became illegal under international law. So, what do you do when the UN bans your entire profession? Well, you get creative with language. This is where the workaround comes in. Professionals in the field created something new, the Private Military Company, or PMC. See, they don't engage in combat, they're just acting in self-defense. They aren't deployed for combat, they're conducting routine security. By just reframing what they do, and acting like any other international corporation, they managed to neatly sidestep that UN rule. And, in doing so, created a legally gray but very profitable new industry. Now, this whole model didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Oh no, it was built and perfected over decades. So let's take a look at how this playbook was actually written. We're going to check out two key examples. One that was kind of the prototype, proving the idea could work, and another company that took that idea and turned it into a massive global machine. All right, so meet one of the very first modern PMCs. A British company with the pretty strange name Kinney-Meaney Services, or KMS. It was founded way back in 1975 by, you guessed it, Special Forces veterans. They started out doing pretty simple jobs, protecting diplomats and whatnot, but it wasn't long before they found a much bigger, more influential role to play. Flash forward to the 1980s. KMS gets a contract to train police forces in the middle of the Sri Lankan Civil War. But, and this is key, their job description started to expand. Pretty soon, it went way beyond just training. Some of their guys were even piloting helicopter gunships. Now, this was a total game changer. It meant the British government could influence the conflict, could support one side, without ever officially sending in its own army. It gave them the ultimate prize, plausible deniability. In this quote, wow, it just perfectly illustrates the thinking at the time. You can almost hear the conversation behind closed doors. The British Foreign Office knew what KMS was up to, but they basically argued, hey, our unofficial involvement is better than the alternative. They were worried about losing influence, so they just let this private company execute their foreign policy for them. So if KMS wrote the first chapter of the PMC playbook, then an American company called Blackwater came along and wrote the rest of the book. Blackwater was founded by a former Navy SEAL named Eric Prince, and it took the PMC industry from this kind of niche service and turned it into a massive global business, especially right after 9/11. I mean, the sheer scale of privatization during the War on Terror, it was just staggering. Get this, by 2007, there were 180,000 private contractors in Iraq. To put that in perspective, that's more people than the number of actual U.S. troops on the ground. They did everything from logistics to protecting diplomats, and honestly, they were incredibly effective at their jobs.
But, and this is a huge but, that effectiveness came at a terrifying price. With almost no real accountability, a culture of recklessness just grew and grew. And in 2007, it all boiled over in the infamous Nassau Square incident. Blackwater guards opened fire in a crowded Baghdad intersection, killing 17 unarmed Iraqi civilians. It caused global outrage, and it exposed the dark side of this whole industry.
So you've got this explosive mix of effectiveness and total unaccountability. That's the new playbook. And what happens when a country takes that playbook and decides to push it to its absolute extreme? Well, that brings us right back to where we started, the Wagner Group, a PMC that stopped being just a contractor and became a full-blown shadow army for the Kremlin.
Ever since it was founded back in 2014, Wagner has been Russia's go-to tool for projecting military power and grabbing valuable resources all around the world. I mean, look at this list: helping annex Crimea, propping up the Assad regime in Syria, showing up all over Africa. They go where the official Russian army cannot, or more accurately, will not go.
And you have to understand, this is a business deal. It's totally transactional. Wagner brings the military muscle to take control of a region, and in return, Russia gets access to gold mines, diamond deposits, oil fields, and really important strategic ports. It's a brilliant way to extend your influence and get around pesky things like international sanctions. So let me give you a really dramatic example of how this whole plausible deniability thing works when things get heated. The scene is Syria, February 2018. A force of Wagner fighters, along with Syrian troops, starts advancing on a tiny outpost held by American special forces. Now, the American commanders on the ground, they're completely baffled. I mean, this is how wars between nuclear powers could start, right? So they use this special de-escalation hotline, a direct phone line to their Russian counterparts, and they ask a very simple, very direct question. Hey, are those your guys walking towards us? The Russians picked up the phone and said no. Nope, not our guys. And with that one word, everything changed. By denying it, Russia officially labeled those fighters as non-state actors. The U.S. military then responded with devastating air and artillery strikes, killing dozens, maybe hundreds of the attackers, including a lot of Wagner guys. To this day, Russia still refuses to admit its people were there. But as it turns out, creating a powerful, deniable private army is a real double-edged sword. Prigozhin, furious over how the war in Ukraine was being run, turned that army against his own bosses. The rebellion was stunning, it was fast, and it ended just as mysteriously as it began. And then, exactly 2 months to the day after his march on Moscow fizzled out, Prigozhin was dead. His private jet just fell out of the sky. So, where does this all leave us? What does the rise of these incredibly powerful, for-profit armies actually mean for the future of war? Well, it's created a brand new and, frankly, incredibly volatile situation on the world stage. And this really gets to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? At the end of the day, a PMC is a business. Its number one loyalty isn't to a flag or a country or some grand ideology, it's to its own bottom line. So you take that plausible deniability we talked about and you mix it with the lack of oversight we saw in Iraq, and you get a perfect storm. Because as we saw with Wagner, the company's interests can suddenly and violently split from the interests of the country that hired them, and the consequences can be explosive. As that line between a national army and a corporate contractor gets blurrier and blurrier, this becomes the really critical question. Because when the motive for fighting a war gets tangled up with making a profit, it fundamentally changes the nature of war itself. And it leaves all of us wondering, on this new global battlefield, who is it that really pays the ultimate price?